to them. Children of the night, what music they make.
Welcome back to Scored to Death, the podcast, the official companion podcast to the book Scored to Death, Conversations with Some of Horror's Greatest Composers. My name is J. Blake Fischera, and the book is available from Silman James Press. It features 14 in-depth interviews with renowned film music composers that have made significant contributions to horror, and have worked with some of the genre's greatest filmmakers. It is available on Amazon and from other book retailers. The goal of both the book and this podcast is to explore the craft of film scoring and celebrate the amazing composers that do it. Today's episode is part one of a detailed discussion with the French composer who professionally goes by the name Rob. He burst onto the horror film music scene with a fantastic early example of retro-synthwave scoring, the 2012 Franck Khalfoun Alexandre Aja remake of Maniac. And he has since worked on numerous films and television shows from all over the world, including Alexandre Aja's Horns, the Natalie Portman period fantasy drama Planetarium, Amityville, The Awakening, the more recent French horror thriller Revenge, and Alexandre Aja's virtual reality horror experience, Campfire Creepers. We've got a lot to get to, so let's get started.
This is the first episode where we're recording live. Like, we're together.
Okay, hopefully it will go fine.
Today I'm with Rob, and Rob flew all the way here from France just to do this interview.
Of course, especially for you. It's a real pleasure.
And we're sitting atop Christie Street in the lower east side of Manhattan. Rob, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know you're really busy. First question is, why just the first name? Why just Rob as kind of your musical handle?
So my full name is Robin Couder, as we say with a French accent. And it just appeared that this is how my friends call me, Rob. And so when for the first time a record company asked me, okay, so what should we put on your record? I didn't really think of it. Like maybe if I had, I would have put out something a bit more sophisticated. I don't know, but it felt natural, like to be called as my friend called me.
When did you realize that music was your calling? When did you really get into music and decide that you wanted to start playing it and creating it?
I would say, as far as I remember, I have very blurry memories from my childhood. So I was probably even before 5 when I started to play with little keyboards toy. Or I remember I was really into decomposing electronic instrument. Like I would take a screwdriver and take everything apart and play with the little parts. So that was my first contact with music, was really from an electronic aspect, sort of fascination for the object.
Sure.
That I still have. And obviously today I like to play with things and not destroy it. But it's a bit the same concept in a way.
I wonder if that's like a creative thing for kids that are creative. Because
I to destroy, you mean?
Not destroy, but like take apart. And try to see like what's going on inside.
I guess it's part of the curiosity, very simply, just to know like what's inside, like what's inside the box. If you're curious, that's what you want to know.
What's making it do that?
And so this is my first really childhood memories, and then I started to play trumpet because I had no special affection for this instrument, but it was the first instrument you could start with without doing any study before, because my dream was to play saxophone. Don't ask me why. It was a child fantasy, and you had to start with theory for a year before you can play saxophone. So trumpet, I guess it's because it's such a hard instrument to play. They wanted the kids to start like as soon as they can to play it. It's quite a shitty instrument. To me, it's really this has like tough memories, because I was 8 years old. And I was a bit, like a skinny kind of kid, a bit like, not in a great shape, I would say. And so it was extremely painful for me to blow in a trumpet. And eventually I, as you say, I fainted.
Passed out.
Yeah, I passed out before my third. I had to pass a test, every year. And the third year, I passed out, just blowing in too much in that thing.
Too much.
So it was obviously quite a trauma. Like to pass out doing music, it's not exactly what I expected at this age.
Yeah.
Even though today I experienced that kind of thing too, but I enjoy it now.
Well, it wasn't.
I look for it.
It's not as traumatic now as it was then.
So my parents, thanks to them, decided to help me stop this torture, and they offered me a synthesizer, which was very determinant.
Around what age was that?
So probably 10 or 11. And why a synthesizer? Because I couldn't afford, and I hadn't the room for a real piano. So it seemed like a reasonable option to have.
Sure.
Maybe it's just luck, but they chose a synthesizer that had MIDI input and output.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened that I also had an Atari ST at this time, which was the first computer including a MIDI interface.
Yeah.
So I started to really explore electronic music at that age, so around 10, with just playing video games with MIDI interface. And I had MIDI files from Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, and I was playing with MIDI files, so just putting some parts in loop and or reversed or changing the notes and playing this with my synthesizer. So when I was 10 years old, we have to understand that it was 1988 or so. And at this time, a guy like Jean-Michel Jarre was quite big in France and in the world, actually. So I was really the kid, like a bit fascinated by this era, this genre in music. So to own a synthesizer at that age and to be able to do some electronic music was really something that blew my mind.
Yeah.
So that's really, I would say, the starting point of a really passionate relationship towards electronic music.
So there was like a little bit of fate going on, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if it's luck or fate or magic. Maybe it was just something very intuitive and instinctive to go towards that kind of thing. Because, I could have done something else with this piano. I could have went towards, I don't know, like jazz or maybe blues or played ragtime, or some kids do that. But no, I was more into not even playing actually, but my synthesizer play alone with the computer.
Yeah.
So that was good. And then I started to listen to my older brother records. My brother Ben, who's a great collector. He has a great shop in Paris called La Dame Blanche. So he's really a specialist now. But at this time, he was already really into. He was a digger, vinyl digger, and so I started to listen to like heavy metal stuff, but not the mainstream things, and not Metallica, but more like I started with Deep Purple, then Led Zeppelin, then Black Sabbath, and he was also into stuff like Christian Death or like weirder stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So when you were 12, 13. That kind of music really takes you by the guts.
Yeah,
so that's what happened to me.
It's a similar trajectory to me. I think people that we're the same age, and I have an older brother also, and I think at least for males, at least from young men, I think even more than we realize, we're probably influenced by our older siblings. Because one, we get a lot of hand-me-down stuff, hand-me-down toys, the hand-me-down clothes.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like we get all the recycled stuff. But then it's like we're too young to buy our own music, and so we end up listening to our
you have to deal with what's around you in
our
the
older
house.
brother's music. Yeah. So growing up for me, it was my brother was in the 80s, was very into Van Halen. And so there was that. And then when I was in high school, I got very into Black Sabbath. And so throughout your teen years, was it still like this hard rock stuff, or when did you start kind of expanding your musical vocabulary in terms of
my own thing? It took me like just a little time to start my own band, starting from this heavy metal hard rock basis. So it was called Insane, and I started as we called it the manager of the band. And so at this time it meant I was in charge of the light during the rehearsal. So that's a very nice conception of the management thing. But it just allowed me now, I mean, from my adult's point of view, it allowed me to sit in front of a band and realize what's good, what's bad, and sort of have a, you know what I mean, a distance, like sort of a producer distance towards music. So that's how I analyze this now. Obviously, it wasn't the case at that time. So I started to, in a way, be interested in production, in how I should advise the guys. Oh, maybe you should stand there, or maybe you should play a bit louder, or maybe, you know, even the mixing. So that was this at this time was Insane. Then step by step I became the second singer of the band, and also the keyboard player. But there are just a few keyboards parts in that kind of music, so I wasn't, except like Stairway to Heaven with the Mellotron, or No Quarter, that kind of song. The rest was a bit hard. So I went more and more into Deep Purple because I was fascinated by Jon Lord, who I still consider as almost a guru, I would say, because I still dig his style, his sound, and the way he includes classical music but distorted. I think it's really cool. So I started to study his playing a bit more, and I started also to work with a personal teacher, a keyboard teacher. And he told me, he was wrong, but it was a good thing. Oh, you're into Jon Lord, then you should buy a Fender Rhodes, which was obviously completely wrong because Jon Lord plays the Hammond. But it's a good thing because first, I can't imagine going back home with an organ on my back. Though that Fender Rhodes is quite heavy too. But then, anyway, I bought a Fender Rhodes under his advice, and I discovered this beautiful instrument. And I discovered that this was actually the sound of so many songs, so many tunes we could listen to. And it gave me another taste of, the love I have for gears. Especially like the gears from our childhood. So today we call it the vintage, but at this time it was just the stuff you could buy. So with my first synthesizer that I still had at this time and this Fender Rhodes, it started to be sort of a combo, like an instrumentarium. Can you say that in English? It's a Latin word that means just like the instruments that are used in your in your environment. And it was just going a bit further down into the production thing and how it sounds. So I could even add some effects on the Fender Rhodes, some pedals, some stuff, some wah-wah, blah, blah, blah. And it led me to jazz funk or more experimental stuff. My brother introduced me to stuff like Mahavishnu Orchestra or bad things like Weather Report or like things that I don't really like anymore, but quite interesting in terms of just to extend your vision, like and also the way of playing, all the instruments that are used. And I eventually started another band, funk band this time. First it was jazz funk, then it went slightly to P-funk, step by step, because I was then 16, 17, and we were into more partying and drugs and sex and just having fun. So P-funk was
just funk wasn't going to do it
anymore.
Funk
is already a good start, and then P-funk it's even more fun, I would say. So we were 12, I think. We were 12 on stage at this time. So it was sort of a big band. It was obviously a lot of fun, sure, and it also showed me how to construct a song, how to arrange it a bit. So 2 guitars, 1 synthesizer, some horns, some percussions.
Sure, yeah.
So it was also the beginning of another aspect of music, like really arrangement aspect. So that was very interesting for this. I was sort of the not the leader. We was the guitar player and we were sort of co-leaders of the thing. And it was, I have to say, a very heavy duty at this time, because all the other guys were really like more into fun and into play gigs and get some chicks, more than to really compose music and be serious about it. But it was really cool. I was dating the lead singer, so I didn't have to seduce her, so I could focus on the music. And that was a very good experience too.
I think everybody considers themselves at least a little bit of a fan of film, of cinema. But at any point, were you into some of the film music that was going on? When did you ever get into film music, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Well, actually, all I said was about music, but in sort of a parallel vision, I was extremely into cinema and into... I didn't identify at this time that it was a score, because I didn't make any difference between the movie and the music. To me, it was just one piece. But I was really fascinated by very strong movie where the music was extremely obvious and powerful. But I didn't realize that music was a big part of the movie at this time. But now I know. Like, I could watch The Mission, the film Mission.
Sure, yeah.
I could watch this movie like every day. And I was really fascinated by the story, of course, but also the music. And I still consider this score as a beautiful piece.
It's Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, Ennio Morricone. Though it's not extremely... it's not a typical Morricone score. That's not the one you would quote first. But it was the one I
It's a great score, and I think it definitely has its fans. I mean, there's people that are very fanatical about that movie and specifically that score.
And I remember especially a sequence in that movie where there's a sort of indigenous choir with kids singing. And the melody they sing in this movie keeps running in my head. Like every time, even though I have to compose something, it crosses my mind, because that's how it is with childhood traumas. Yeah, it stays there in your mind forever. So this movie is part of it. And also I remember watching, in English you call it The Fearless Vampire Killers, Roman Polanski.
Yeah, the Polanski film. Yeah.
And this one was also like a huge part of my child inspiration. And the music is so beautiful in there, the Christophe Comeda music. Sort of subcarpatic harpsichord, female vocals, very vampire-ish, but also with a lot of humor. And this music is also always in my mind. Even something I quote musically without noticing. And after I'm like, oh shoot, this music exists already. But this is how it is, I guess. Inspiration works like this. So these movies, I think I could watch them like almost every day or every week during my childhood. Even though I was maybe 6 or 7, this was a great era of VHS. So
we were very lucky in that we grew up as I call our generation the video store generation.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of the first generation of children that had access to be able to rewatch things over and over again. Before that, all you had was if you got it on television or if you bought the novelizations and to listen to the score. Those are like the only ways and then in the late 70s it became kind of popular, and even before that some people would buy like the shortened 8mm
the films. I had this at home too.
It's like
was
you watch
like cartoons
watch like the 5-minute version of Star Wars.
Exactly. Yeah, but it's true that we are lucky, because this was the first time that you could have like a really nerd relationship with movie because you could own the movie.
Yeah.
You could have the object. You could actually like carry it on with you, and it's something.
Take it to somebody's house. And
Yeah,
watch
yeah,
it
exactly.
there, too.
And plus, it's true to say that the object, the VHS, the tape, it was really cool. I mean, you had the cover, you had the back cover with just little pictures. It was really, you could own the movie and take it with you, as you said. So it's for sure it created
it created like a record mentality to movies. Like you said, like the cover, you could read the description. I went to film school and I did a lot of actual shooting. The cinematographer when I was in film school, I shot a lot of people's films, and they would ask, like, how does it look? Because we were shooting film, so there was no monitors. It was just like through the eyepiece. Yeah. And they'd be, how does it look? And I was like, oh, it looks like back of the box. Meaning, like, this frame is this. If you were going to make this a VHS tape, this would be the one on the back of the box. Or side of the box. This was
even
like
smaller.
This is the frame that would be on the side of the box to sell the movie. And so it was tangible. You had the art. They were still using the DVD arts now. Or sometimes I don't know why they redo them, but we had beautiful art, and even some of the horror films like Black Roses. When you went into the VHS store, it would be raised, like you had gimmicky boxes. It was like
it's interesting that you mentioned this little picture like on the side of, because we have to realize that this very picture, this very little one, it had a huge importance on us, on our generation, because that was our first look on the movie.
Was often just the spine of the side of it.
Especially when it came to the horror movie district in the store. This picture had it's crazy the influence it had on me at least.
Yeah.
Because I was a kid, so I wasn't really allowed to go in that section.
Sure.
The only thing I could have was just this vision of the
that
movie.
Little, you could whatever font was written in, which early on was just usually a white font, but then it started to get more stylized. But you could see like the title, and then there was always just a little tiny frame that was like you said, it was the only representation we have of what that movie was about.
I thought that's why I think the guys like us, the relationship we have towards genre movie and horror movies is so passionate, and so there's sort of a great intimacy between us and this kind of movies, because it was from the childhood. Like this vibe is very tiny, it's very subtle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's something that it's hard to describe. It's really something it's like a pin on your brain. You know, when you're a kid, when you're 6, everything you see, everything you hear, everything has a huge importance. And that kind of thing, to have a shock picture like this, to have the reanimator, like just a screenshot of this when you're 6, it's really like you have the feeling that there's a huge world behind this cover, behind this VHS, that you are not allowed to access, and that is something like greater, I don't know how to describe it. It's really something
even to this day, when I'm talking to somebody and they're like, oh, have you seen so-and-so movie? Have you seen this movie? And it being an older film, I'd be like, I know I've never seen it, but I know the box. Like I've seen, like I know, I can picture the way it looks in the video store, but I've never seen it. So it really has made it. That's imprinted itself on our brains for sure.
And again, my older brother had a huge importance on me, because he had the access to this VHS, because he was 8 years older than me. So he could just go to the store and take whatever he wanted and take it back home. And so I could just hear some noises from the room next to mine. And also I had quite a dark brother, as you understand now.
He was listening to some hard rock and metal.
He was actually really in love with that kind of movie, so he even he used to buy the posters and would put it in his room. So his room was like very mysterious and dark world.
I have a cousin that's like that.
And he smoked a lot of hashish, and with all the Wes Craven's posters everywhere, listening to Christian Death. Sure. So he was, when you're a pre-teenager kid, to have an older brother like this, it's really like, wow.
I had an older cousin. My brother's like 5 years older than me, but then I had a cousin that's probably more of that difference, a little bit older than my brother. And when I would go over my aunt's house, his room he had put like a lock, like a deadbolt on his room, and he had the key. But sometimes it would be open, and I would walk in, and not so much movie posters, but it would be like Ozzy, Bark at the Moon, all kinds of heavy metal posters, and Ozzy with blood coming out of his mouth and all this stuff. And it was like, it was
beautiful.
crazy.
It's beautiful.
It captured the imagination of a little kid.
Yeah, exactly the feeling of entering into a cave with forbidden artifacts. That was very interesting. And plus, he was an artist in a way. He loves to draw, to paint, and to even do sculpture. But you could tell he was really under the influence of chemicals. So he did just weird stuff. So his room was really like a strange mix of a museum, horror, like really a weird cave.
Sure.
So just to go there when he wasn't there and to discover some mysterious aspect of something that I was not allowed to discover, it had also a great influence on me.
Now, you were interviewed for a French documentary about John Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
Not speaking French, I turned it on and I didn't know what you were saying. So so these questions are in reference to, like, was he ever like an influence on you? Like what kind of things would you have talked about in that documentary? Like, were you interested in his films when you were growing up, or did you discover his stuff later?
No, he's the perfect example of what we're talking about. Like the kind of movie I would first discover on the cover in the store, and then see some artifacts in my brother's room, and then eventually watch the movie. So I think Halloween was the first one I could watch. I think it's a good start for Carpenter's work.
Probably a lot of people's first Carpenter film.
And I was probably too young. Like most of the experience I had in my life, I would say I was a bit young, because I was the youngest of the four siblings. So that's why probably I went into different experiences a bit early. So I think I watched Halloween when I was probably 12. And it's the perfect age, because you get it in your face. You're like, fuck. So that's what happened to me. I was literally frozen. I was like, it was extremely a very intense experience. And obviously, again, the music just blew my mind, but without noticing. So I think it's really, it may be not my favorite from Carpenter, but I think it's his best. It's a real masterpiece, even from a composer point of view. I mean, it's perfect. It's really perfect. It's so simple and crazy, and I love the way he included the influence of minimalistic. You say that?
Sure.
Minimal music. Well, you know what I mean. Like, to put this into a horror movie, that's so cool. That's so clever.
Yeah. Well, he is kind of the master of minimalism. I interviewed him for the book, but I also interviewed Claudio Simonetti from the band Goblin, and we talked about Carpenter. And he said with Carpenter, it's like you can hear one note, and you know it's Carpenter, and it's like more effective than any note even if you played the same note, it like wouldn't have the same resonance as if he played it. You said Halloween's not your favorite. Do you have a favorite?
Maybe New York, 1987.
Escape from New York.
Yeah. Sorry, that's how we call it in French. We have a lot of weird translation in that kind of movie. Anyway, and also the even behind the notes and the composition, just the production of the music, like it left a huge print in my mind. use of sequencers and synthesizers
Sure.
and drum machines. What I love with all this period in my life is that everything happened like without me doing anything.
Yeah.
That's what's so great in childhood. Like you just have to let yourself go and just be with the good person, I guess. So you have to be a bit lucky, but it's just everything goes inside you without doing anything. So if you meet John Carpenter when you're 12, it's perfect. It gives you the right keys.
Are kind of the perfect. At least I can only speak from my experience, but for like a young male, like his movies are kind of perfect for 12 to 15, 16. You got like, because they're cool, like Escape from New York is cool. Big Trouble in Little China is probably
very cool.
It's probably like the coolest movie ever.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
There's nothing about that movie that's just not cool. And then you get the horror stuff. Even Christine, had a huge impact on me.
It's a masterpiece. It's beautiful.
Growing up.
Yeah.
So throughout your teens, you kept playing music, and then into the late 90s, you started to have some success.
I wouldn't say that. I like to think that I've never been successful, and I like this idea because I think being successful, it wouldn't be helpful to me, because where I am right now, I can be really myself. I don't have any commercial pressure of any kind. I do really what I want to do, and the directors or the musicians coming to me are just interested in what I do for real. Not, you know what I mean? It's not like I did a big hit and now everyone's coming to me. Okay, I want to do the same.
But there are plenty of people who play music through their teens and stuff and never get out of playing cover songs in local bars. At least you started to record some of the stuff. Success in that way.
Oh, success in that way.
Just like the next professional step.
Yeah. You're right. So it happened. Actually, I didn't intend to be a professional musician at this time. I studied painting and engraving. How you say that? I was in a fine art school in Paris. So I was sure I wanted to be an artist, but not sure about what exactly. And so I went into fine arts, and I really loved that. I was studying with a master called Vladimir Velikovic, who was a very tortured Serbian artist, very influenced by like Francis Bacon and stuff like this. So he did really like a bit hardcore paintings with big crucifixions and blood and Now, when I say this, I have the feeling that my whole life has been like conducted by the weirdos in the world. But I was actually a happy kid during all this time, and a happy teenager.
Often the people that are into things like horror movies and heavy metal are happy.
Yeah, it's true.
It's like it's a weird outlet that other people don't have.
There's more depression
cathartic.
In mainstream, probably. Yeah, it's right actually. Anyway, so I was in that school, and I had some medical issues, some lung issues. So I had to quit everything for a while. I went to the hospital and got surgery, and it sort of made me realize that, the kind of thing you want to realize when you're 18, that okay, life is short, and maybe once again, 18 is a bit early to think of this.
Yeah.
Again. But anyway, that's my life. And so I quit my girlfriend, and I started to focus on what I really want to do and who I want to be, and try to be a good person and really connected to your deep inner feelings. So I eventually quit this school, where I was quite miserable because I didn't feel very comfortable surrounded by Serbian artists. But I had still my band, and I started also to have a little home studio. So I thought that maybe I should give a chance to that part of my interests.
Yeah.
And I started to focus on the music like just 24 hours. A friend of mine just gave me an apartment, a big apartment next to Paris, and I started to just compose music day and night for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And it's when I met my first record company called Source, who I was introduced to by my friends from Phoenix.
Sure.
They were signed on this label, and they told me, you should meet those guys there. A guy called Marc Tessier-Ducrot, he signed also Sébastien Tellier, voilà, that kind of people.
Yeah.
And I started to understand that I sort of, I belong to that branch at this time. And I was obsessed with producing music, and I started doing only this. So it was a very interesting period in my life, because it's the first time I really did only one thing. And, so being 18, 19, and doing like constantly music, being very poor, but you don't care this time. And I had no family, nothing to take care of. Just I could eat pasta, or not even pasta, maybe to eat a glass of water, and just smoking pot and doing music all the time. And eventually the artistic director of this label started to think, okay, this guy is really into it. We should maybe talk about it. And he really pushed me to, he was really encouraging and saying, okay, this is great, should do more. And he was a great guy, Marc Tessier-Ducrot. He really managed to give me some self-confidence and to persuade me that I was able to do this.
Yeah.
So I had a 8-track tape recorder, very nice thing.
Yeah.
And I did I don't know, maybe 40 or 50 tracks, and we picked 20 of them, and we went to a professional studio to record. So that was my first big step in the real world of production. I was very influenced by the 70s French producer at this time. The great Serge Gainsbourg albums like Melody Nelson, like L'Homme à tête de chou, this is very arty poetry / experimental / pop music. The kind of music they would do in France in the 70s. And it's what I loved is that it was really a mix between 70s pop music, so a lot of Fender Rhodes, synthesizer, the electric bass played with the muffled sound, but also with an input of classical music and weird arrangement with strings and horns.
Yeah.
So something a bit experimental and very romantic.
And I'm running. I'm running from the goal. And I'm dreaming. I am dreaming I will the world.
And that's when I realized also that my music was very romantic. I always wanted to put some emotion, some feelings, some whatever it can be. It can be sadness, melancholy, or love, or I don't know, but something related to emotion. I'm not a great dance music producer for sure. That's not the music I can provide. It's whenever I try, it's a disaster. But when it comes to just being emotional, that's where I feel really comfortable. And so that's what I did. And we recorded my first record then, called Don't Kill.
And when did the idea or the opportunity present itself for recording music for film?
It was a bit later, maybe 2 years after, so in 2002 or 3, when I met my, at this time she was just my girlfriend, but she eventually became my wife. And she was in a director school in Paris. So I started to hang out with directors and DOPs and script doctors and those kind of people. And she asked me to, because I was a musician, she knew it, of course. She went to my show, and she asked me to score her first short movie for it was a school study. And it felt so natural to me, and it was very obvious that it worked very well. That my music on pictures was just okay. It was a perfect match.
Yeah.
Because I was very into. Though I recorded like this Don't Kill, I was already into instrumental music. It's the time where Air released Moon Safari, so it was a big step into a mix between instrumental and pop music. It was the first time in the 2Ks that there was a audience interest for instrumental music, not related to dance music.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
It wasn't house music; it was pop, but instrumental. And to me, it really opened the door to what I really wanted to do, to record. Because it's quite experimental to think that you can release a record of pop instrumental. It's a bit okay, but what's the point? But there's a point, and it goes so well towards score. It is actually, it's kind of a soundtrack, pop instrumental. So this first short movie was called Pink Cowboy Boots. I even played a little part in it. And it was my first experience. It was very unprofessional at this time because I didn't know how to lock the music on the picture. I didn't have like a real Pro Tool stuff at this time. So it was more I composed the song and the editor had to work with it.
Sure.
But it was sort of a success in our posse. I don't know how to say. Like everyone really noticed that it was a great score actually. So I did the second one for her, and then I met some friends of her like Rebecca Zlotowski or Teddy Modeste, who asked me to score their first feature when they just went out of school. And this is how I scored Belle Épine and all the rest.
Okay, I know it seems like we're just getting into his film scoring career, but that's about the midway point and a good place to stop for now. I, of course, need to thank Rob for being part of the show. Please come back in 2 weeks for part 2 of this conversation, when we will dive into his composing process, his film scoring career, and much, much more. The next episode is an absolute must. If you've been enjoying the podcast, the book, Scored to Death, Conversations with Some of Horror's Greatest Composers, is available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other places you buy books. Or you could order a signed copy from me directly. Just contact me through scoredtodeath.com. You can also find and follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Scored to Death. Scored to Death, the podcast, is available on most podcast apps and distribution sites, as well as on SoundCloud and YouTube. Please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show on iTunes, or on whichever provider you listen to podcasts. Ratings and reviews will help raise awareness for the show. My other podcast, Saturday Night Movie Sleepovers, can also be found on iTunes, Google Play, and most places you find podcasts. And on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sat Sleepovers. You can find Rob on Facebook at rob.dodecalogue. That's rob.dodecalogue. Thank you so much for listening to Scored to Death, the podcast, and please come back in 2 weeks for this conversation's exciting conclusion.